Hi everybody and welcome back. In today's video, we're going to talk about why you might want to consider doing coffee enemas, and more importantly, what the research says about coffee enemas, the safety, the efficacy, what they do, what they don't do. And in another subsequent video, I'm going to talk about some of the misconceptions and perhaps untruths that are out there in the internet about coffee enemas, because my goodness, there are a lot of those. But let's start with the research, and we'll talk a little bit about why on earth you would want to insert coffee directly into your colon or rectum and what the proposed therapeutic value is. Now, for those of you who are maybe new to this concept, coffee enemas have been around actually for quite some time, about 100 or maybe 150 years. They were first really popularized by Dr. Gerson as a treatment for cancer. And to this day, in 2021, if you go to a Gerson clinic and see a Gerson Institute trained professional, you can go and have nothing but fresh green juices and numerous daily coffee enemas as part of your treatment, most typically for cancer, but occasionally other chronic diseases. That is not super widely available and cost effective for most people. So instead, a lot of people end up doing coffee enemas from home. And that's more what we're going to talk about today. Now, there could be different therapeutic effect from people who are doing this, once a day or once a week or once a month at home versus people who are going to a Gerson clinic and they're doing coffee enemas 4 or 5 times a day, and they are doing all of those fresh green juices, and I don't know what else is part of that therapy. So keep in mind that the Gerson protocol in and of itself might have different efficacy and different qualities to it than the DIY at-home version. But nonetheless, this is something that might be therapeutic for you if you have IBS or SIBO or IBD or GERD, or even if you have some detoxification issues. So we're going to get into that. The big things why people use it, again, it was developed and popularized more as a cancer therapy, but the biggest things that you see out on the internet and what you will hear from proponents of this therapy is that coffee enemas stimulate the vagus nerve, which I honestly have yet to see documented. And interestingly enough, when I get to the video in the series where I talk about my experience with coffee enemas, because yes, good YouTube viewers, I did coffee enemas myself specifically so that I could do this YouTube series for you and I could understand the ins and the outs, pun intended, of coffee enemas. So I took one for the team and I actually did several coffee enemas for the sake of this series. When I get to that part of the series, though, where I talk about my experience, I'll tell you a little bit more about how I tried to understand the effects on the vagus nerve for me individually and why I was not able to prove that coffee enemas do anything for the vagus nerve. So for what it's worth, my N=1 experiment will be part of this series. But for right now, let's talk about those benefits. So it is proposed to be a detoxification mechanism. And the idea is that the coffee and the antioxidants in the coffee get picked up and absorbed by the portal vein, and that is the big venous system that is carrying blood from the gut up to the liver. And then once the antioxidants and the palmitic acid get to the liver, it stimulates bile flow, it stimulates release of bile from the gallbladder, and it stimulates detoxification. That's what the internet would have you believe. I have yet to see anything really documented that proves this, though. The other thing that gets frequently talked about, so detoxification being one, stimulating the vagus nerve being number 2. The other thing that is related to detoxification somewhat is that coffee enemas supposedly increase glutathione production. The number that I see consistently across Facebook groups and blogs and all of the internet is that it raises glutathione S transferase by 600 to 700%. Now again, I have yet to see this documented. It might be like a great big game of telephone. Like one person might have just said this and then everybody else just cited that one person. I don't know what's going on. But honest to God, I have dug through the internet and I have yet to find documentation that coffee enemas stimulate the production of glutathione. I wish they did, but I don't know if I'm willing to believe that right now. But let's go through, we're going to come through PubMed a little bit and I'll show you the handful of studies that I chose to show you. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what the usefulness might be for coffee enemas. And then, like I said, there will be more videos in the series, so stay tuned for more. But let me see if I can go to a screen share. All right, so if you look here, I typed in coffee enema in PubMed and you can see that there's only 41 results that popped up. And a lot of these go way back to 1978. If we only come through the most recent, say, 15 years, that narrows our search down to 23 articles. And a fair amount of them are documenting either perforated colons or rectal burns or some sort of safety issue with coffee enemas. Now, here's the thing to know. I'm going to do a whole video on how to do coffee enemas from start to finish, including cleanup. And one of the things you have to know is that you have to get the temperature right. Like, please, please, please don't be the person who puts scalding hot coffee in your rectum. That's just an ER trip waiting to happen. So I don't know where these people got their information, the people who got rectal burns from coffee enemas, but you want it somewhere right around body temperature or a degree or two warmer. So like 100 degrees Fahrenheit is usually right about where you want to be. That being said, 41 total articles on the entirety of PubMed is not super convincing. By contrast, if I type in probiotics, I get 31,890 results. Wow. Like, that's a pretty big difference. Now, you know I'm a big stickler for research and knowing the pros and cons and the limitations of it, though. Just because fewer people have researched coffee enemas, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can throw the baby out with the bathwater and assume that they are less effective than probiotics. But I do think it's compelling that we have far more research on probiotics, prebiotics, nutrition, even a lot of herbal supplements. We have way, way more data on them as opposed to coffee enemas. So for what it's worth, only 41 articles in the entirety of PubMed. I would say about 50% of which are regarding safety concerns and things like rectal burns and rectal perforations, rather than the therapeutic value of them. Here's one of those studies that I popped up: The Safety and Effectiveness of Self-Administered Coffee Enemas, a systematic review of case reports. And this was 2020, so this is relatively new. And you can see, if you skim down the results, they had 9 cases where they were able to document adverse events, most of which were mild to moderate, and then 2 of them were quite severe. But they, the thing that cracks me up is that they then say conclusions. Based on the evidence reviewed, this systematic review does not recommend coffee enema self-administration as a complementary and alternative medicine modality. It's like, well, but there's only 41 articles, and of all the thousands of people who have done coffee enemas, only 9 adverse events being documented on PubMed. I don't know. I don't know if that's super compelling. But this is one of those 41 articles, The Safety and Efficacy or Effectiveness of Self-Administered Coffee Enemas, and they definitely had a cautionary note. Then, this is the Pharmacokinetics of Caffeine. So this I thought was interesting because when I started doing these coffee enemas, again, for you people, not because I wanted to do them, but when I started doing coffee enemas, one of my concerns was that I hardly ever consume caffeine. And when I do, my body is like, whoa, what are you doing to me? So I started out with a very low dose of coffee, and I gradually built up to the full dose because I was worried that the caffeine was going to hit me really hard. But interestingly enough, they were way ahead of me. This particular study, this is 2013, and they looked and they said that the caffeine obtained from coffee enemas were 3.5 times less absorbable or less absorbed compared to orally administered coffee. So if you are a coffee drinker normally, it would probably take 3.5 times the amount of coffee enema doing to get the same effect if you're going for the caffeine hit. If you want the caffeine specifically, you might as well do oral consumption rather than rectal administration. So that was very interesting. And what I liked about the study was that it was randomized, and they took the healthy subjects and they randomized them into the coffee enema group or the oral coffee group. Then they gave them a washout period of 10 days, and then they repeated the other thing with each group. So if you started out with orally consumed coffee, the second time around you did the enemas. If you started out with the enemas, the second time around you were doing the orally administered coffee. So they were testing both things on all of the 11 people, and they said that the caffeine was quite significantly less absorbed when administered rectally as opposed to orally consumed. So if you're doing this for the caffeine, don't bother, just drink the damn coffee. This was also a very fascinating study, and come to think of it, was it, yeah, it looks like it was actually the same research group. So this was a 2012 paper, and they were looking at the antioxidant effect after coffee enema or oral coffee consumption in, again, healthy male volunteers. And this was trying to prove or disprove the glutathione hypothesis, I think, because if you look, they said that after the two-phase crossover study to investigate the coffee enemas versus oral coffee, 11 subjects were randomly assigned to either the coffee enemas 3 times weekly for 6 visits, so over the course of 2 weeks, or a ready-to-drink coffee beverage. And then there was a washout period, and then they did it with the other, they swapped groups. And they measured levels of glutathione in the blood, and then 2 markers of oxidation or inflammation in the blood, this TEAC and this MDA substance, both of which are markers for antioxidant or oxidative stress in the blood. So they're measuring the antioxidant that supposedly goes up with coffee enemas and 2 markers of inflammation. And what they said was that based on their study, at least, where they did 2 weeks of either and they compared it to oral coffee consumption, there was no beneficial enhancement in glutathione levels or decrease in MDA levels for either the orally consumed coffee or the coffee enemas. However, the TEAC levels after 12 days of the coffee enemas did start to improve, and after 6 days, they improved with the oral coffee consumption. So again, guys, I don't know, like if you're going for the antioxidant effect of coffee, truly you might be better off just drinking coffee. Because if you look, 6 days versus 12 days, it looks like orally consumed coffee starts to kick in and have an antioxidant effect even earlier than rectally administered coffee. So for what it's worth, they did try to measure glutathione levels and they did try to measure antioxidant protection, and it wasn't super, super compelling for the coffee enemas. Now, a thing to note too is that theoretically, you could have different levels of glutathione in different compartments of your body. So theoretically, you could have the same level of glutathione in your blood, which is what they were measuring, but maybe the amount of glutathione in the brain went up, or the liver, or the bone, or the spleen. Like, they didn't take biopsies of all of these different tissues, so we really don't know the complete picture, but it is pretty compelling that they saw no difference whatsoever. So I don't know, between the fact that they saw no difference in this study and the fact that I have tried to scour the internet to find the citation for the 600 to 700 increase in glutathione S-transferase, and I will be damned if I can find that reference, I'm kind of thinking the glutathione thing is a bunch of malarkey, if I had to guess. Moving on. This was an interesting study, a little bit more recent, 2014. Coffee enemas for preparation of small bowel video capsule endoscopy. And what they were saying in this study was that one of the big things that will impede the doctor's ability to get useful information out of a video capsule endoscopy is if there is bile that is left over in the intestines when they go through and they're trying to visualize things. So what they did was they did the normal prep for the capsule endoscopy using this PEG substance, this polyethylene glycol, or they had another group that was randomized to do the polyethylene glycol and coffee enemas. And they were looking to see if the prep was better, and theoretically, if the coffee enemas really cause the dilation of the bile ducts and the contraction of the gallbladder, it should mean that doing the coffee enemas empties out your gallbladder, gets all the bile out of your system, and then there should be relatively little left to pour into the GI tract by the time they get to do the capsule endoscopy. So theoretically, they were actually hoping to see something positive here because they were hoping to use it as a prep method. And what they said here, they said that the quality of bowel preparation was evaluated in the 2 groups. Bowel preparation in the proximal segments of the small bowel, so that's the beginning part of small bowel, the part of the small intestine that is closest to the stomach. The preparation in the small bowel, the proximal segments of small bowel were not different between the 2 groups. And that's the part of the intestine where the bile duct is dumping in and where the gallbladder is dumping the bile. So you would think that you would see the most profound effect in the proximal segment of the small bowel. Maybe, maybe not, but that's what I would think. They said that they were not different between the two groups in the upper small bowel. In the mid and distal segments of the small intestine, bowel preparation tended to be better in patients who received coffee enemas plus PEG rather than the patients who received PEG only. And then they did go on to say the coffee enema group did not experience any complications or side effects. Coffee enemas may be a feasible option, and there were no clinically significant adverse events related to the coffee enemas. But more randomized studies are warranted to improve small bowel preparation for the video capsule endoscopy. So it was neat. I mean, it was a small group. It was only 34 patients. And, you know, I wonder if there's even better ways to study this. But they did say that there was at least some notable improvement in the farther parts of the small intestine, like as far as clearing that out and prepping it for the procedure. So maybe that means that it does make the gallbladder dump all of its bile and it gets that nice gallbladder squirt. Not sure. But it seemed like the upper small intestine, it was not compelling, not different, and the lower part of the small intestine, maybe a little bit different. So that's something. This, I was so excited because I did a fresh PubMed search today just to do this video. And this was brand new. It was published since the last time I did this search. But I can't read anything. I couldn't find the full text. I can't find it anywhere. I tried to use Sci-Hub. I tried everything I could think of. And all it says here, the coffee enemas have been used for 150 years, despite the efforts of several, over the last several decades, by some in orthodox medicine to stamp them out as quackery. The author and her patients and other practitioners find them very useful in the alleviation of symptoms. But it's like, was this the whole paper? If somebody could get me the full text of this article, I don't know what I do. I would like high five you virtually because I would love to read this article. It's brand new, hot off the press about a month ago, but I cannot find the full text to save my life, and it's just annoying the poop out of me. So if you could help me with that, that would be wonderful. It sounds like, just from the abstract, the author sounds very defensive and very like, I find them beneficial. And it doesn't sound like it's going to be super evidence-based. It sounds like it's going to be purely an opinion piece, but I would still love to read it. So if somebody could help me find the full text of this, I would love that. Then I did pull up one additional article. This was not indexed on PubMed, but I did a Google Scholar search, and I was able to pull up one additional study that I thought was worth sharing. And this was the effect of coffee enema on constipation. And you can see that this is, a lot of this I'm not going to be able to read to you guys. I'm sorry, I don't read Korean. But if you look here, basically they took 42 patients and they were treating them with coffee enemas 2 times a week. And then they were scoring the constipation score, the frequency of defecation, and they were checking that before treatment, after 1 week, and after 1 month, and then the satisfaction score. And they did see that there was an improvement in constipation parameters. Now the thing is, again, I can't read Korean, so when I tried to look at the full text article, it was in Korean, so I cannot read it. But what I was curious of, did they do coffee enemas 2 times a week for the entire duration of the study? Or was it like they did coffee enemas 2 times a week for 2 weeks and then they checked in a month later? I don't really know what the protocol was for this. Like, you know, if you do coffee enemas, or any enema for that matter, and you're checking in with patients throughout that process, of course they're going to feel like their constipation is better because 2 times a week you're manually clearing out their bowels with the enemas. But this would be much more compelling if they did the coffee enemas and then they waited an entire month after the study was done, and then they checked in and there was long-lasting effect after the coffee enemas. That would be very profound in my opinion. But I cannot tell from this, and let's see, I'll try to download it again. Let's see if I go to the PDF. If I remember correctly, this is the one that was in Korean. There was another one I looked at too, though. Yeah. If anybody reads Korean, also, like, I would invite you to check this out. I just found this article on Google Scholar, and I don't know how to read Korean, so I've got nothing. But see, like they're saying 1 week later and 2 months and 1 month later, does that mean that they ceased the treatment and then they checked in a week later and then a month later? Or was this while the patients were still receiving coffee enemas? I don't know. So any help on that, I would also dearly love. Look, I'm kind of crowdsourcing, trying to get you to find me a full text PDF and trying to get you guys to translate a Korean article for me. But any help would be greatly appreciated, because I really want to understand what all is going into this coffee enema thing. And, you know, I want to have an honest and balanced critique and conversation about this, because I do think that they can be helpful for some people. Some of my patients have been really, really profoundly helped by coffee enemas. And others, I think a lot more people have either not tried them, or they're scared to try them, or like they kind of don't want to go there because of the yuck factor. But if there are people who could benefit from this therapy, and it's reasonably cheap and easy to do and can be helpful, like I want to learn more. But I think that right now, my kind of perception of it is that the hype on the internet and the claims on the internet are here, and the documented evidence that is in the published literature, granted that's not the be-all end-all, but still, the documented literature that we have on this therapy is like here. And I would love to understand which one is correct, or if they both are correct in different ways. So I'm trying to understand this a little bit more completely. But for what it's worth, I don't necessarily use coffee enemas with myself or patients as a means of detoxification or as a means to increase glutathione. Really, I think about it more for the sake of treating constipation and possibly vagus nerve and motility, although that is a little bit up for grabs because, again, I tried to do my N=1 and I haven't really been able to prove the vagus nerve thing, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a following video. But I think of it more as a treatment for motility, SIBO, IBS, maybe maybe bloating, abdominal pain, that sort of stuff, as opposed to detoxification. But that's my current understanding on it, at least. In subsequent videos, I'm going to talk about some of the, like I said, some of the bullshit that's out there and some of the hype and the less scientifically validated claims that I have seen on the internet regarding coffee enemas. And I'm also going to do a video on the DIY, how you do it, how you do the setup, the prep, the cleanup, the measuring, the everything. And also I'm going to talk about my own experience doing coffee enemas for the sake of you guys and YouTube, and just understanding this so that I know how to coach people through it as a clinician and as an educator here on the internet. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that this sheds some light on coffee enemas, and I will see you in the next video. Hey guys, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, click the like button, and leave a comment down below with the videos that you would like to see me do next. Doing all of those really helps support the channel and support my efforts in making as many videos as possible for you guys. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.